Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Leader Tree, where leadership grows, where strong roots build stronger skills, and where today we're going to talk about Independence Day. It's the 4th of July, and everything is happening here. We got an amazing thing happening in this country, and that is the celebration of leadership itself. The celebration of taking one thing and transforming it into something else. The celebration of a new beginning. And that is leadership in a nutshell. That is the goal that we all try to aspire to be as leaders. So as a country, we feel like we've accomplished something. Because we're like, 244 years old, something like that. But really, in the grand scheme of things, we're very young. Right? We're very young indeed. We're just children, right? I mean, think about it. England is like almost 1,100 years old, right? France, about 1,600 years old. Italy is about 3,000 years old. China is about 4,000 years old. I mean, we're little guys, right? In the history of the world. But we've had such a large impact. Why is that? It's because of our leadership. We have changed the game. We took things to a new level and we expounded on it. You know, right now in the world, we've got a whole bunch of this stuff going on with this Black Lives Matter thing. And black lives do matter. But you know what? So does everybody else's lives. Right? And more importantly, we need to not tear down all of the history that got us to where we are. You know, one of the biggest problems with this Black Lives Matter movements that I can see is that they're abolishing and they're tearing down monuments to people just because those people might have been a slave owner or might have not treated black people well, maybe. Okay? But let's not forget about the other things that person did, and let's not forget about the time that person lived in, because they're not mutually exclusive. They're all meshed together. Okay? Throughout world history, slave ownership has been a constant. Today, slave ownership is a constant throughout the world. People are bought and sold as commodities. That is still true today as it was back then. So, I have nothing against anybody in the United States who says, you know what, my ancestors were oppressed. Of course they were. That was the world that those people lived in. Was it right? No. Is it the right way to do things? Hell no. Of course it's not right to try to own another human being. But you have to understand the time set. Okay? If you were going to get anywhere in life, you had to follow by the rules of society. Society said you had to own a certain number of slaves to be acceptable. Believe it or not, that's a fact. There's another place in Europe. This doesn't happen anymore because they figured out that it was a flaw. But it used to be a similar situation, although a little bit convoluted from what we're talking about here, that you used to have to own tulips in order to be socially acceptable throughout Europe. So there were these certain types of tulips. And if you had them in your garden, you were an important person. And if you didn't have them, you were a nobody. It didn't matter what your birth was. It didn't matter what your wealth was. If you didn't own these tulips, these flowers, you weren't accepted. Later on, they found out that the particular tulips that they were talking about had a genetic default in them, which made them so pretty. Once they found out that it was a default, everybody said, oh, no. But people would spend millions of dollars on a single flower that was going to die. It's insane. Why did they do that? They did that because that was the time they lived in and they really didn't have a choice. The same is true for a lot of the leaders in the United States. In the time that they lived in, they didn't have a choice. Now, does that say that given the choice, they would have chose differently? I can't tell you that one. Maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't. But here's what I will say. The leaders of this country have always been at the forefront of thought. They've always made changes, and they've always built in opportunities for further changes. That's forward thinking, and those people should not be vilified for the time frame that they lived in. They should be celebrated for the fact that they gave each one of us our freedoms. They gave each one of us the ability to throw off our oppressors. You're out there wreaking havoc on the world right now because they gave you that ability to do so. Think about that. Just think about it. In the grand scheme of things, the United States is very young. We've got a lot of growing up to do. We don't grow up by ignoring our past. We grow up because of it. We grow up because we allow ourselves the opportunity to learn from previous mistakes. Those men, those women, those people should be celebrated for their achievements, not vilified for their faults. Andrew Jackson. Big thing. Want to throw Andrew Jackson down the toilet bowl. Did you know Andrew Jackson is the only president in United States history that ever got our country out of debt? Did you know Andrew Jackson did a lot for equality? Did you know anything about the man, or did you just say he was a slave owner, let's throw his statue in the trash? George Washington. Same thing, he was a slave owner. Did you know that he gave a freedom to all his slaves on his deathbed? Why did he do that? Because he enjoyed owning slaves? Or was it maybe because he had to have slaves due to the times he lived in? But when he knew he wasn't going to live there anymore, he let them go. He wanted them to have their freedom. That's the world that you deny our children access to when you remove their history. That's the lessons that you deny all of our children to when you remove their history. We shouldn't forget the sins of the past. We should celebrate them, because only in doing so do we learn for the future and continue to grow. And that's what leaders do. That's leadership, leading by example for others to follow. In this country, we led the example by saying, we're going to break from the King of England. And we're going to tell him that we deserve to be free from the oppression of the state of England. Right? And I say state being, the global state. Not like a state in the Union. So, by doing that, every one of the men in that room were committing an act of treason. Every one of them signed their death warrant when they signed the Declaration of Independence. They didn't take that lightly, folks. And if they didn't include everybody, that's because that was the time they lived in, not because they thought you were inferior. The only people that got a chance to vote in it were the people that were smart enough to understand. And that wasn't just black people being left out. That was anybody who didn't have enough money and education to own land and to be a member of society. Things changed over time. Now we all have the right to vote. But we didn't just get there. Okay? Things were done for us in order to get there. We pushed it in order to get there. And all the Black Lives Matter things that are going on right now, you're pushing it again. And it's going to get you somewhere again. But think about the fact that you have the rights to do that because those guys that you're vilifying now made it possible. That's leadership. It's flawed. Leaders don't always know the right answer, but they make a decision. Why? Because decisions need to be made. They may not always be the decision people want, but the decision needs to be made. They may not always make the right decision, but the decision needs to be made. So they make it. And then they own it. And there's not a man in that room that didn't own their decision when they decided to throw off their oppressors and become the United States. So we celebrate the United States of America today. We celebrate it every single year. We've got the coronavirus keeping us from mass gatherings. But then we got other states that say, screw it, I want everybody there. We have the freedom to do that as individual states because the men in that room back in 1775 gave them that freedom. They thought ahead. They thought ahead for the future where the slaves may have a chance at not being slaves anymore. They thought ahead for a future where people who didn't own any land and weren't members of society would one day be able to be such. They thought ahead to a future where people who didn't have any rights of their own would have the same rights as everyone else. That forward thinking should be celebrated today, as should yours. The Black Lives Matter movement, it's a pretty cool thing. You guys are standing up and you're saying, hey, we've taken enough shit. You have. But do it smart. Because when you make dumb decisions on top of your good decisions, what you do is you ruin it for everything that you do. Right? When you go into black neighborhoods and you start tearing up the place, that's a dumb decision. And you ruin every other decision you make because people look at you now and they just think you're a bunch of thugs. And that wasn't the plan. That's not what Martin Luther King would have done. The hell, that's not even what Malcolm X would have done. Those two were polar opposites in their approach, but they all knew the same things. If you want freedom, you have to show the example of why you need it, why you deserve to have it. Running in the streets, tearing shit up, looting buildings, stealing, that doesn't show anybody that you deserve freedom. It shows everybody that you're still too young. America, we got a lot of growing up to do. We're just children in the long run. But we are on the right track. We are making tremendous strides all the time. And the world has taken notice of our leadership. The world backs us. The world gets behind us. We're not powerful just because of our location on the planet. We're not powerful just because of our wealth. We're powerful because we have strong leaders. We have strong female leaders. We have strong black leaders. We have strong Latino leaders. We have strong Asian leaders. We're a country that welcomes all, where other countries actively don't or haven't in the past. We have helped change the policies of many other countries, just as France helped us see that we could be different. It was the French who helped us become a democracy. It was the French that helped us decide to be free. It was the French that helped us pull it off. Today we thank France. You go anywhere, go to Lafayette Square, there's a reason why that's there, folks. He was a slave owner too. But you wouldn't be here without him. None of us would. Okay, I'll jump off my soapbox. Happy birthday, America. Thank you very much for all you've done for me, for my friends, and my family. Thank you to all the founding fathers, every single one of you, for the forethought and the leadership that you showed in putting together what I feel is one of the greatest plans in world history. Folks, we're very young, but we're still learning. Think of your own kids. You got to punish them a little bit here and there for the mistakes that they make. But you don't say, I forgot that. Right? You don't pretend it never happened. You make them own it. Don't get rid of statues and tear down history. Own it. Learn from it. Grow from it. And let's make this the America that we all want it to be. And you know what? Even that is still going to change. Even if we make this perfect utopian society as we see it today, 100 years from now, they're going to come up with things that we didn't think of. And they're going to try to change it again to make it better. Because things can always be improved on. Right? For example, a computer used to take up an entire building. We thought it was the most amazing thing ever. It can calculate on its own. It can do things on its own. It can come up with ideas on its own. It's a computer. But it can get better. Somebody figured out, hey, I can put that whole building onto my desk. And they shrunk it down. And we thought, that's amazing. It could never get better. It's never going to get better than this. What an amazing time to be alive. Blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Somebody thought, I can take that computer sitting on my desk. And I can shrink it down and put it in my lap. And we thought, oh my God, now I can take it on the go. I can do all these things. This is amazing. What an amazing time to be alive. There will never be anything better. And then you know what? Somebody said, I can take that computer on my lap. I can put it right in the palm of my hand. And now we've got a cell phone that is as powerful as a computer that used to take an entire building to house. In the palm of each of our hands. Every day. More powerful than the entire computer system of an airplane. Sitting in the palm of our hands every day. But do we say that that computer in the size of a building wasn't worth anything because it wasn't complete yet? No, we don't. We recognize it for the merit that it brought. And we should not be doing anything else when it comes to the founders of our creation and our nation. The nation that backs your play right now. You may not be happy with everything that happens in this country. I'm not happy with everything that happens in this country. But those men in that room 244 years ago gave us the ability to look at it, to re-examine it, to make changes to it without the system breaking apart. And you have to acknowledge that achievement. That's leadership. I hope everybody has a great 4th of July. I'm Chris Miller for the Leader Tree, reminding you to always keep smiling.